learn about the seasons that visited us there in the farmhouse, to recognize the moments the seasons were composed of, to find and picture that genius of each day, the seasonal moment that only occurs today. Like the time when the bittersweet berries rupture in November. That's our old barn in the background there. Or the way the starlings would gather in great numbers in the field across the street and move like a unit. And then when they would all take flight together, it would sound like a great sail going taut as it caught in the wind. It was really amazing. Or the apples that would be left in the apple tree late in season. Or the ridiculously oversized fruit of the Osage oranges that would get caught in the crooks of their own branches. It was a particular place I would look for that. And then here's the farmhouse on another November, not the same November after Mom passed, but another November. And this time the pin oak tree is not all brown, it's red and green. The apple tree hasn't turned yet. And I had become by this point sort of a student of the seasons. And I learned about this term phenology, which is the study of cyclic and seasonal phenomena in relation to climate and plant and animal life. And it might be observations like mine over the years that would tell you that the climate is warming or the climate is cooling or something like that. And I even kept a little calendar. I would note it was an Indian summer day on November 3rd this year. The grasshoppers were there, the cabbage butterflies, the ladybugs in the lee of the wind, and the blue jays mobbing the pin oaks and things like that. So that was the way the phenology project got born. And this was something that I carried on for about 5 years while we still lived in Iowa, celebrating a corner of an ordinary Iowa county, and dedicated to the idea that each place and each day has a genius of its own. I did most of the phenology project within a stone's throw of home. I also adopted some local places that I liked to kind of hang around in. There were a couple places where there was some restored native prairie. This photograph was taken in one of those places where the pin oak leaves are there mixed up with wild indigo. And all these pictures I've showed you have been taken in the same week, basically the first or second week of November. And then once in a while, you would see a truly spectacular genius of the day that would just capture you from nowhere. And here's one early December day after the department holiday party, standing at the end of the driveway when the northern lights were out in Iowa. I had never seen it before or since. Quite a moving experience. So that's the way the project started. And now I'm going to take you to part 2. Here we go, part 2. So during COVID-19 in Washington, we no longer have 2 acres more or less. We have about 15 or 20 feet of front yard in North Seattle, where we've been busy during COVID, putting the garden in shape and weeding everything. And my wife has done a very spectacular job with that in particular. But it's a great contrast to Iowa, but that's part of the point. One thing is that this appreciation of the seasonal moment occurs wherever you are. The seasons come to you, they travel to you. And when in Washington, you look for the seasonal moments of Washington. The moments that are like, and sort of like ripples on a pond, they appear, but they don't remain, and you don't have them. But there will be another one that will come along. So my outside our bedroom window, there's a plum tree and this little bird. This is, I think, a bush tit that comes around every year in a mob, little gray balls that are moving and moving in constant motion, and some of them hanging upside down as they eat something out of these little blossoms. And then here is a bug, and that actually is the technical name for this thing. This is a true bug that was found in the Japanese maple down by the garden. And our, another day, our California poppies that we'd like to say thrive on a certain amount of neglect, growing down by the sidewalk. Became a little bit of a student of the bees as well. There have been several kinds this year. I don't know if you can appreciate this guy's really full pollen sacs here as he comes over the branch. And the whole project has, besides causing me to sort of tune in or be receptive to what the genius moment is, it's also made me a real student of the light. And that's what I love about this particular picture. And there's another bee. And more flowers in the garden. And a little hummingbird we were visited by one day. This was literally over my wife's shoulder in the garden. And that sort of emotional reaction that the picture can sometimes evoke in you. And then here was a moment, just happened to be there with the camera when the blue jay was harrying the immature bald eagle on the top of the tree. And again, like that picture in Iowa, sometimes something really spectacular happens. And here's one morning with the moon with the earth shine on it. This is the earth reflecting onto the moon and reflecting back to us, okay? So you can see the dark side, dark part of the moon anyway, and you can see all the little craters right along the edge of the light and dark side. And you probably didn't notice the planet Mars in conjunction with the moon here this particular morning. It's all around us if we just look for it. So that's how I sort of came to my genre, which I call candid nature photography, catching nature being herself, exploring the world in the light of the moment. And here are the reasons I think that this is a great hobby for brain health. You practice openness to the moment. You live in the moment. This is when I most am living in the moment, when I have my camera and I'm looking for this. And you're expecting to find the genius in the day. It is there, it's there for you to find. And this is a habit of optimism that you cultivate and maintain a record of your narrative, which I'll come back to. And then the act of actually making the photo can be a nice exercise in problem solving too, which is the fun part of it for me. So I thought I'd then give a few little tips if you're interested in doing anything like this or something one-off from this. The first thing is, here we go. First thing is just start. Don't set it up, just get started. You can see the project for me evolved from what it was at the beginning to what it became. Every time and place at every scale has its own genius. Here's a few more pictures from this summer, from the COVID summer, if you will. And learn about what you're photographing. Sometimes there's a lot more to the picture than meets the eye. So this is a crow, right? You've seen thousands of crows in Seattle. But did you notice that this crow has blue eyes? And that's because this is a new baby crow. It's the size of an adult, but they have a blue eye for the first summer. This will become dark next fall. And they have this little gape here, the corner of the mouth with just pink. That's your camera is not as important. The camera you use is not as important as your subject and your approach. I did the whole phenology project in Iowa with a little point and click prosumer or consumer digital camera that we got at Best Buy. This is quite inferior to your iPhone. Couple more pictures from the summer from this. So what is this? This second week of July. So these are all 3 pictures taken in the second week of July in Iowa. And just to make the point, it's not really about the camera, it's about your choice of your subject. It's a monarch caterpillar, and this is butterfly milkweed, which is a native prairie plant. But the monarchs will only lay their eggs and grow up on milkweed plants. And here's a dragonfly. The next point is that the light is subtle and passing. You have to learn to recognize and appreciate it, and you can't count on the light remaining. So if you see that picture, now is the time. So here's a little towhee. This towhee lives in our yard, and we've been watching him all spring. Runs around like a mouse through the underbrush. Sits there on top of things and calls at you. But you can see, caught in that light, you can see his red eye. This was, something about that condition was the genius of the day this time around. And then that's my definition of a good picture. It's one to which you have an emotional reaction. That's kind of a give and take thing. It has to do also with what you know about your subject. But when I go back and I sort through them later, and the one I select is the one I ask myself the question whether I have an emotional reaction to that picture or not. Like this one. Like this one there's something about this picture, something about the way that the wings of the hummingbird scissor across each other that really moves me. Or the way this white-crowned sparrow has this kind of jaunty stance, makes it stand out among others that I threw away. And that would be my advice, is to choose your keepers well. They help you tell your story, but as you go back and think about them, they really become the anchor points in your story, and you may retell your story around them. So in a sense, they sort of become the narrative. So, for example, that is my mental image of those 2 acres in Iowa. So that's an introduction to the phenology project and the openness to the genius of the day. And I'd love to take a few questions. Thank you for your attention.